Is it important to understand the history of HIV and AIDS?
Well, it's important to know the cruel history of this epidemic. It's important for us never to lose our commitment to those who are still suffering from HIV. It's important for people in Western countries not to lose their empathy for those in the developing countries. And it's important as a species to learn lessons from the history. So history is important. From history we'll grow our solutions with the aid of science that ultimately consigns HIV to a footnote to human history.
If you look upon Australia, the response to HIV and AIDS in Australia, how would you briefly describe the development?
At first, horror, dismay, the inability to find ready cures and ready responses, skepticism about the suggestion that the response would include reaching out to vulnerable populations and reform of the law to protect vulnerable populations, great political battles, leadership from the Minister of Health in the Labor government, the federal government, leadership on the part of the coalition Conservative opposition, taking a strong stance, which basically under successive governments of different political persuasions we have maintained in Australia. It has been an honourable, a proud, really a noble story of democratic politics actually working for the benefit of all the people and particularly the vulnerable.
AIDS paved the way for discussing human rights in connection with global health. What can you say to that?
HIV has been the driver for many innovations in public health. One of them was the innovation at the beginning of the epidemic that health had a legal aspect and a human rights aspect. Now, generally with epidemics, human rights and legal rights were thrown out the window. A person in the epidemic is rounded up, put in quarantine and kept there for as long as they are at risk. But when HIV came along, the number of people who were already infected was so great that there was no way that you could have rounded them all up and put them behind barbed wires. There just wasn't enough barbed wire in the world to do that. And therefore a different strategy had to be adopted, and that different strategy involved the AIDS paradox, that you had, instead of locking people up, you had to engage with them. You had to engage with their mind. Why did you have to do that? Because we didn't have the antiretrovirals, we didn't have drugs which would cure them or prevent them getting the virus, and therefore we had to get into their minds and try to change their behaviour. A very big ask in matters of sexual conduct and drug use and so on. But that is what we did, and it very shortly did lead to changes in human conduct and to the use of condoms, the engagement of communities of gays and of sex workers and of drug users and of others. And all of this was a change in the way health was dealt with. And then when HIV was able to be treated with antiretroviral drugs, a new problem came. And the new problem was, how did we make sure that that was available to the whole world? That you didn't have to be born in Sweden or in Germany or in Australia in order to have the benefit of a national health scheme and access to the best affordable health care. And so suddenly we began to talk in terms of the global human right to health, a fundamental notion. And that, of course, is not yet attained. It's not yet fully attained in any country. But we've begun to make progress towards this, and it will probably continue to have quite significant consequences for the HIV epidemic, particularly in the patent law and the patents that exist on some of the vital drugs for the purpose of treating people with HIV, but adding to the cost of the drugs and making it sometimes inaccessible to the poorer people.